Good morning, good afternoon, and a good evening, everyone, depending on where you are. And thank you so much for joining us today. And I see a lot of familiar faces, our FEC Fellows, and also Nalin, our FEC academician. He also joined us today as the mentor for our fellows. Thank you so much, Nalin, for joining us. We're delighted to welcome you to this first edition of Future Earth Coast's Fellows Session 2024. And this year, for us, the Fellows Session is not only a gathering, but it's also a dynamic platform that is designed to empower early to mid-career researchers with the tools, knowledge, and networks you will need to make a lasting impact in your fields. And as we gather here today, we celebrate the rich diversity of perspectives, experiences, and expertise that each of you will bring to the table. And this kickoff session marks an important milestone for us in FEC's ongoing commitment to fostering collaboration, innovation, and excellence within the FEC community and beyond. So today we will explore the critical themes of sustainable energy and climate resilience. And we will hear from two speakers who are at the forefront of research and innovation in their respective fields.
Thank you. So I'm a faculty member based in Bhubaneswar, which is in the eastern part of India. So here I'm presenting the topic that is local adaptation to climate change in South India, challenges and future in the tsunami-hit coastal regions. So before entering into the topic, let me briefly explain about the overall context of this study and how this research actually emanating. So what is the objective of my presentation? So here I'm trying to understand and critically discuss the vulnerability and adaptation of marine fishes to climate change and risks by focusing their local institution. So my focus is exclusively based on some selected fishing villages in Nagapattinam district in the state of Tamil Nadu in India. So you can ask a question that why Nagapattinam district and how it will be, how it will provide some insights to my own region, because you may belong to China, and some I can also see that some participants are from Iran. So why should I know about Nagapattinam district and how it will be helpful? So I will provide the overall context of the study, and I will explain that how this study is internationally relevant. So I have the slides of around 70, but I will not be reading the entire slide. So I will take some specific time to introduce the overall context, and I will directly enter into the focus of my research. So this is the overall planning. I will introduce the research context, and I will also introduce the conceptual underpinning, and I will explain that how this study was conducted and why this region was selected and how this region and fishing villages were selected, and how this research was conducted at the field level. And I will explain about the overall themes of this study, that is indigenous knowledge system, vulnerability and adaptation actions, and local institutions. And finally, I will discuss about fisherwomen and air agencies in responding to climate change. So overall, this presentation actually comes from the book that I recently published. So this is the name of the book with Routledge, Local Adaptation to Climate Change in South India, Challenges and the Future in the Tsunami-Hit Coastal Regions. So when it comes to climate change adaptation, we can broadly divide the entire research into two categories. One is top-down and the other one is bottom-up. So mostly we find research articles that deal with the top-down approaches of climate change. So we can find researchers that talk about the quantitative assessment and policy level discussions and energy-based interventions to respond to climate change. The other approach of climate change adaptation is bottom-up, which is focusing on local institution, local knowledge, traditional knowledge systems, local actors, and local politics, and how it actually affects and influences climate change at the local level. So climate change may be an international phenomenon, but its effects are actually getting impacted at the local level. So climate change may be an international phenomenon, but it has got deep social and political dimensions, which I want to discuss in this study. So why I chose to study Nagapattinam district to conduct this research? There were three main reasons. This is the map. As you can see that India and Tamil Nadu, the state of Tamil Nadu is located at the down south, and the Coromandel Coast of Tamil Nadu, which is located at the southeastern part of Tamil Nadu. And my study villages are actually located here. I specifically selected 6 study villages to conduct this research. So coming back to the previous slides, why I chose this Nagapattinam district, what was the reason? There were 3 main reasons. This particular Nagapattinam district is one of the most vulnerable coastal region to climate change, not just in the case of Tamil Nadu or India, but also in the case of the entire South Asia. So this district was continuously hit by climate change and associated risks for over the past 2 to 3 decades. Continuously, almost every year, this region was hit by cyclones. And in 2004, the second reason of choosing this particular district was the tsunami effect. In 2004, the Indian Ocean tsunami disaster devastatingly hit this region with around 7,000 mortalities. Around 7,000 people got killed, and this particular region is the most affected region in the Indian mainland. So these particular coastal regions also having the long-term effects of the tsunami disaster. So the long-term effects of tsunami disaster also integrates and complicates with the ongoing climate change effects and risks. The third reason that I choose this region is this particular region predominantly possess Pattinavar fishing communities who have the history of around 2000 years. So for 2000 years, these particular fishing communities have been living in this region and traditionally been engaged in marine fishing. Since they have been living in this region for more than 1500 to 2000 years, they have developed a system of local institutions which is still relevant. But in the case of India, we can find many top-down researchers that deal with climate change adaptation. We can also find researchers, anthropological research that deal with the coastal communities, but we do not have research that integrates the importance of traditional marine fishing communities in the context of climate change adaptation. So that is why I chose this region. So again, some theory. So I will come back and explain that how I specifically chose the fishing villages, and then I will directly jump into the study findings. So before that, I also want to discuss that how this research was built at the scholarly level. So we almost all the scholars widely accept the fact that inequality and marginalizations are the 2 most important determinants that influence the vulnerability to climate change. So coming to coastal South Asia has around 20.6 million people are at the risk to sea level rise, and India ranks top among all the 233 countries for the year 2008. So since 2000 to 2005 to the contemporary period, the coastal India, particularly the coastal regions of southern India, have continuously been hit by cyclones, erratic rainfalls, and rising temperature, and also heavy sea level rise. The sea level rise continuously hit the coast of South India, which make them more vulnerable to coastal erosion, which have got the long-term repercussions to the lakhs and lakhs of coastal fishing communities who predominantly reside along the coast. So India is one of the top 10 countries that is largely hit by climate change. So coming to the coastal South India, which is coastal Tamil Nadu. Tamil Nadu is the southernmost state of India that covers the coastline for about 1,076 kilometers. Around 90% of the marine fishers of these regions are still engaged in traditional marine fishing. So cyclonic storms and depressions hit for about 31 times with disastrous effects from 1952 to 2004. And as I have already told that in 2004, this particular region was hit by the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami disaster, and the most affected districts including Chennai, Kadalur, Nagapattinam, Tanjavur, Ramanathapuram, and Kanyakumari. So coming to the issues of small-scale fisheries in coastal Tamil Nadu. So can we say that only climate change is the predominant vulnerable factors to marine fishers of South India? No. Marine fishers of South India have been continuously hit by different factors, and climate change is one among factors. There were many other issues such as overfishing, unsustainable fishing, complications of coastal regulation zones, changes in the market, environmental pollution, and weather patterns. So the problem is that climate change and the erratic weather patterns and the long-term effects of 2004 tsunami disaster complicatingly affect the already ongoing effects of small-scale fishers of coastal Tamil Nadu. So again, coming back to the point that I have already told, why Nagapattinam district of the Coromandel Coast of Tamil Nadu? Of course, this particular Nagapattinam district is low-lying, and around 1 million fishers are directly and indirectly are dependent on marine fishing in this region. And this particular district is one of the most productive fishing regions in the entire India. And fishing communities of these districts were particularly hard hit by the tsunami disaster. And again, as I have already told, that the fishing communities, which is the Pattinavar fishing communities, have got internal governance systems that is the part of the world civilization, and they have historically developed and inherited a set of institutions, rules, regulations, and governing the coastal commons. And these particular local institutions are still relevant in the lives of marine fishers even today. And this particular institution, Fishermen Council, is a all-male council, which is that these particular fishing council traditionally exclude fisherwomen not to participate in it, which means that the entire district, Nagapattinam district, governs the coastal commons with male but not female. So what are the 4 themes of research? So in this presentation, I will be showing that how indigenous knowledge and climate perceptions of fishermen have changed in the face of climate change, and what are the vulnerabilities and adaptation of marine fishes to climate change, and what are the roles and governance systems of local institutions in adapting to climate change, and how fisherwomen and their agencies are adapting to climate change. And these are my research questions. I'm not going to read. As you can see that my research is something that go beyond indigenous knowledge. So my first focus is to identify the indigenous knowledge and climate perceptions of the fishers, and then I wanted to know about the vulnerability and adaptation capacity of marine fishes to climate change, and then I wanted to know about what are the roles, governance systems, and the limits of fishers' local institutions in sustaining and adapting efforts to climate change. And then finally, I also wanted to know that what are the newly formed women's agencies in responding to climate change and adaptations, and how are influential local institutions are responding to it. So these are some of the conceptual underpinnings which I don't want to discuss too much. So when it comes to climate change and climate variability, meteorologists have always got some kind of contestations that how many years of weather data should be taken to consider that the particular region is hit by climate change. Some meteorologists usually say 30 years of weather data are required, whereas the IMO says that around 40 to 50 years of weather data are required. So in this study, I specifically focused on the 30 to 40 years of weather data to understand the weather and climate patterns of these particular districts have changed over the period. So these are some of the themes: resilience, vulnerability, and institutions, adaptive capacity, and adaptations. So when it comes to vulnerability and adaptations, we have extensive literature that discuss on vulnerability and adaptations. So to simplify, vulnerability can be defined as the potential for loss. So for my research, I specifically took the case of IPCC 2014 report to conceptualize the concepts vulnerability, adaptation, resilience. So I also conceptualized about social resilience. Many international scholars primarily emphasize adaptations because of three important reasons. Because the risks of climate change projections are very much evident. Climate change projections and environmental risk may not be quantifiable, and sometimes it is highly qualitative, and therefore the transformations of the systems are required to respond to climate change. What are the 6 major factors for adaptations? So when it comes to adaptations, we mainly focus on the policy actors, but in reality, the recent literature states that we have 6 major factors for adaptation, and these 6 factors have not largely been delved by the social science scholars: political leadership, institutional organizations, public support for adaptation, funding for adaptation, adaptation decision making, and stakeholder engagement, and availability of usable science. So as you can see that the availability of usable science, only one among the 6 prime factors of adaptation. So when it comes to adaptations, we also need to ask, there are many questions. What do they adapt and why? Who or what systems adapt? How do they adapt? How well do they adapt? And what impacts results? So these are the questions that I took before going into study. And these are some of the conceptual definitions that are given by IPCC, like coping, adaptation, and community-based adaptation. These also I took consideration. So I primarily gave focus on community-based adaptation, since my research fell into the category of bottom-up adaptation to climate change, bottom-up approach to climate change. So I mainly focused on local adaptive and organizational capacity, and I also focused on climate resilient livelihoods, and I also focused on underlying causes of vulnerability. So over the past 2 decades, many social sciences and developmental studies on climate change adaptation predominantly focused on sustainable livelihoods approach to understand the vulnerability and adaptation of fishers and farmers to climate change. So when it comes to sustainable livelihoods, developmental scholars focus on 5 capitals, that is natural, physical, economic, human, and social capital. But in the recent years, there were other 2 capitals also came into place, that is information and cultural capital. So on the one hand, I gave focus on sustainable livelihoods approach, but then I realized that since my focus is to study on local institutions and local politics and local power to understand climate change adaptation, sustainable livelihoods approach may not be sufficient. So I took the case of AIL framework that was formulated by Arun Agarwal, who is based in the University of Michigan. So we also have extensive research that focus on institutions. That is, so institutions reflect formal governmental processes as well as formal and informal social patterns of engagement. So when it comes to local institutions, what we are actually talking about, we have 3 types of local institutions. One is public local institution, other one is private local institutions, and the third one is semi-formal or informal local institutions. So in my research, I found that 3 types of local institutions actually exist in the coast of Tamil Nadu. So they, again, this is some of the literature. So why should we focus on local institutions? Because local institutions are already rooted in the traditional communities and they are already well positioned to deal the environmental threats and environmental related projects, which means that we cannot talk about coping and adaptation mechanisms without considering the importance of local institutions. So because local institutions and local key leaders influence the climate change adaptation efforts at the local level, and they act as the bridge between the state and the local people. So this is the adaptation framework that was devised by Arun Agarwal. So what I did, I integrated sustainable livelihoods approach and adaptation institution livelihoods framework, and then I formulated this framework. So I found that there have been broad impacts of climate change, and that has got social, spatial, temporal, structural intensity, and predictability of environmental risk. And I also found that fissures are not just affected to climate change, but also affected to multiple stressors. And I also found that climate change interacts with the already ongoing environmental and developmental stressors, which make the marginal fissures more vulnerable to the effects of climate change. And this is the way that I identified my research site. This is the way that I conducted literature review. First, I focused on the vulnerability of coastal India, and then I focused on the vulnerability of coastal Tamil Nadu, which is one of the important coastal state that is located in the down south of India. And I focused on the climate change vulnerability of the Nagapattinam district. And I found that Nagapattinam district is vulnerable to multiple effects such as sea level rise, coastal erosion, climate extreme, and the long-term effects of tsunami disasters. So these are some of the literature that I found. The literature clearly found that a large portion of the Nagapattinam district is already under the low-lying region, and sea level rise particularly hit the marine fissures, particularly small-scale traditional marine fissures who are largely dependent on traditional knowledge, are the ones who are hard hit by the climate change and the long-term effects of tsunami disasters. And these are the vulnerability effects of Nagapattinam district. So as you can see that between 1991 to 2015, Nagapattinam district had faced 4 cyclones, 4 heavy rainfall events, and the deadliest tsunami disaster in 2004. And 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami disaster brought devastating damages, and as well as it brought positive changes in the lives of the marine fishes, because it paved the way for the international organizations to enter into Nagapattinam districts. And the international organizations, including non-governmental organizations, provided multiple welfare and developmental facilities and measures to the marine fisheries of these districts, and those measures are still ongoing. And another important factor is that the roots of this traditional self-governance systems of these fishers have a rich social and cultural history. So how I conducted this research? First I went to the Nagapattinam district, and I made some pilot survey and also sought help from the local NGOs. And then I also engaged with the local NGO employees, and I identified that less populated villages and single caste villages are the ones that are largely hit by the effects of climate change and disasters. And this is the way that I conducted research. Since I will take another 10 minutes to to explain this research, and I will end up my presentation. I will not take much time, but this is the way that I conducted this research. Who are the stakeholders? So after identifying the particular Nagapattinam district, and I also collected local data to understand and shot down the most 6 vulnerable fishing villages. So these are the 6 vulnerable fishing villages that I conducted field study. So there are some commonalities between all these fishing villages. All the fishing villages were hit by tsunami disaster. All the fishing villages have the population of less than 2,000. And all the fishing villages are continuously hit by coastal erosion, which is one of the short-term effects of climate change. And all the fishing villages face extensive damages in the recent period due to cyclonic effects. And the fishing villages also traditionally have got the local institution, that is Fishermen Council, and all the fishing villages are governed under the lines of two governance system, that is formal governance system that emanates from the state and informal governance system that emanates from the Fishermen Council. And this is the way that I conducted research. So who are my respondents? Marine fishers, fisherwomen, panchayat leaders, leaders of the statutory senior fishermen, local political leaders, local NGO employees, and a few government employees. So this is the data that I collected. So mainly I focused on senior fishermen, middle-aged fishermen. Why? Because to discuss climate change, we need experienced fishermen, because the fishermen should be living in that particular fishing village for more than 2 to 3 decades, so that he could able to recognize the effects of climate change by comparing it with the past weather experiences. So first I identified the climate perceptions of fishermen. So all the fishermen, this is the article that I published based on this particular theme. So what is indigenous knowledge? So in reality, we have very limited research that focus on indigenous knowledge or local knowledge system. Fishermen of this region are still dependent on local knowledge system, but then they have realized the fact that their local or traditional knowledge systems are of no relevance in the face of climate change. Very recently, particularly after 2004, fishermen are increasingly recognize the fact that their local knowledge system are of no relevance, because the climate has been changing, weather has become erratic, and fish populations have become declining, and due to this they have been facing multiple vulnerabilities. So what are the few questions that I asked with the fishermen? So these are some of the questions that I asked. So one thing I found that over the past few decades, almost all the senior fishermen and middle-aged and young fishermen recognize the fact that climate change is real. There is no doubt that fishermen deny climate change effects. Fishermen absolutely agree with climate change effects, but then they also say that how climate change has been affecting them. Climate change has been affecting them in multiple ways. First, they have faced the continuous loss of fish over the years, species declines, soil erosion is very much real, and they also identified the fact that climate change increasingly increase the effects of 2004 tsunami disaster. And many young fishermen accept the fact that their indigenous traditional knowledge systems are of no relevance, because they are increasingly dependent on weather forecasting mechanisms that are freely available from the state and other social media tools and so on. So these are some of the seasonal calendars that I found from the fishers, and fishers largely accept the fact that the fish that they used to catch some decades back are no more easily available and accessible in the recent years. And they also identified the fact that many fish species are already extinct or endangered. And what are the important climatic variables? So one thing I did was I collected the data from the fishermen based on their indigenous knowledge, and then I compared with the recent scientific findings. And then I found that there have been large-scale consonance with the climate perceptions of fishermen and the recent scientific findings. So temperature is something that is increasing over the years, that is agreement with the scientific findings, but climate event is something that is only partially agreed by the fishers. So what are the indigenous knowledge? So here I also provided some local voices which I don't want to read, but as you can see that many fishers are increasingly dependent on external sources like government bodies and donor agencies to forecast temperature changes and the fish movements. So over the period, particularly over the past 10 years, fishermen are increasingly come out from their dependence on indigenous knowledge systems. So which means that there is a compulsory to document the local indigenous knowledge systems of the fishers. Otherwise, we will be losing forever. So what are the vulnerabilities and adaptation of marine fisheries to climate change? So these are some of the vulnerabilities. Geographical isolation. So in fact, climate change is real, but it doesn't affect all the fishing villages equal. So some fishing villages are particularly more vulnerable because of their geographical isolations, because of their weak developmental infrastructure, because of their over dependence of marine fishing, and because of poor sanitation and wastewater management. So many developmental and weak infrastructure also make the fishers to get more hard hit by the effects of climate change. And these are some of the local voices. So overall, all the fishers, irrespective of the fishing gears that they use, accept the fact that climate change is real. And they also agree the fact that they have largely been spending on fuel to travel more into the ocean to catch fish. For example, before 10 years, they could easily catch fish by just traveling 4 to 5 kilometers. But these days, they have to travel for around 20 to 30 kilometers inside the sea. And even after traveling into 20 to 30 kilometers inside the sea, they couldn't able to catch the fish that they used to catch easily. And traveling inside the ocean also bring more risk factors to the fishermen because they could easily catch up with the massive sea upsurges. Over the past 10 years, 4 to 5 fishers got killed in the unpredictable weather patterns when they ventured into the ocean. So what are the few coping and adaptation strategies? So I could see that changing the fishing gear, being over dependent on state assistance, that is financial assistance, formal credit, and welfare measures of the state government. Here I also want to emphasize the fact that the state government of Tamil Nadu largely support the small scale fishers for their fishing and everyday livelihoods. So they also provide financial assistance to them during fish ban period and during the times of climate extremes. But then still, fishers also have got the grievance that the financial assistance that they receive from the state government of Tamil Nadu are no longer adequate in the light of growing inflation. And this is one of the papers that I published, Insecure Lives Under Climatic Conditions, Insights from the Fishing Hamlet in Tamil Nadu, India. So as you can see that, what are the factors influence the adaptive capacity of marine fishes to climate change? So it is not just the climate change vulnerability influence the fishes to adapt to climate change. There are multiple factors make the fishes to adapt to climate change. One is shared values and social norms and efficient local institutions, human capital. In fact, the villages that have got the population of more than 5,000 are more efficient to respond to climate change. So I will take only 5 minutes to wrap up the findings. So one of the important findings that I found that to respond to climate change, fishers are increasingly being out-migrated, which means that fishers are overly dependent on taking foreign jobs. So as you can see that fishers of Tamil Nadu and Kerala are getting manual jobs, are increasingly showing interest to get manual jobs in Malaysia, Singapore, and Gulf countries. So over the period, they are losing their touch with their traditional occupation, that is marine fishing. So what are the barriers to coping and adaptation efforts? So I could see the cultural and social barriers. Here I return to the point that I have already told, that the fishing villages of Tamil Nadu are increasingly being governed by male fishers and male-centric local institutions. So cultural and social barrier is also one of the important factors, because these days fishermen are also expressing their interest to participate in the governance systems, but then the male-centric local institutions are not ready to share power with the female-centric institutions. And I could also see that information barriers and apathy of the state government towards marine fishers and technological barriers also make them to more vulnerable to climate change. So here, one more important point that so these are some of the political parties buildings. It's not building, it's actually kind of a small small construction, I would say. So across coastal Tamil Nadu, we could see these type of party buildings in many fishing villages. So all the fishing villages have got local institutions. So one of the important local institution along the fishing villages of Tamil Nadu coast is Fishermen Council. And then the next local institution is the state local governmental institution. And the third influential local institution is these political parties. And the fourth local institution is the semi-governmental local institution, that is fisherwomen self-help group. So here I actually made a kind of power layer. So at the top, Ur Panchayat or Fishermen Council play a major role in influencing the fishers along the coast. After that, local self-government, after that, political parties, after that, Fishermen Cooperative Society, after that, Fisherwomen Cooperative Society, and women help self-help groups. So these are some of the points that I have already discussed. All the local institutions have got roles, but those roles are not directly dealing with the effects of climate change. They have different roles. They have the roles to maintain control of the fishing villages. Some local institutions have got main roles only during the elections, and some local institutions have got roles to distribute the social welfare measures of the state to the people. But none of these local institutions have got direct or indirect roles that directly deal with climate change. So these are the categorization of the local institutions based on their political influence, based on their influence. So I found that interactions and patterns among the local institutions. So this is the complicated pattern, I would say. I need more time to explain this, which I don't want to do. But if you ask me to share this information, if you write to me, I'm happy to share these details, and I'm happy to share more details on it. So these are some of the interaction patterns. So many local institutions have got, some local institutions have got only, they only deal with some other local institutions. For example, bureaucrats mainly deal with political parties and local institutions and Ur Panchayat, but not with the fishermen and fisherwomen cooperative society. So these type of disintegration among the local institutions also make the fishers to respond to climate, not to respond to climate change. So I'm wrapping up. So whether local institutions are responding to coastal erosion, yes, but not directly. And what are the social adaptations of marine fisheries to climate change? Again, this is the complicated pattern. We can see that we have got social networks, we have got informal institutional capital, we also have got formal institutional capital. And these capitals directly and indirectly deal with the fishers to respond to climate change. But then here we also need to understand the fact that these local institutions have also got some limits at the local level. They don't have shrewd local leadership. They also do not have structured local governance systems. And they also face the fact that they are not properly being considered by the state government. And again, fishermen and their agencies are recently been growing up. And then they also have got some kind of power contestations with the already existing influential local institutions. And here you can see that fishermen and fisherwomen have got different roles and activities in different stakeholding settings, as you can see that. Gender divisions of small-scale fisheries. So in my research, I also found that there have been several local voices that directly and indirectly allegate the Fishermen Council and their apathy towards some weak local institutions. All these local issues particularly affect particularly affect the fishing villages of not to respond to climate change efficiently. So what are the some recommendations and policy measures? So the Tamil Nadu government have got vision and financial resources, but Tamil Nadu government do not have got direct connectivity with these fishermen and fishermen cooperative societies to deal with climate change. So the approach of the state to respond to climate change at the coastal India has largely been top down but not bottom up.
I'm sorry, Devon Gerard. Okay, is this the last slide? Because we ran 20 minutes for each speaker. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Yeah, given the time constraint, I suggest we can share your slides maybe with our audience later after the session. Because I think Surya will also have another 20 minutes to present. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, and I'm ending up. And finally I would say that this research is something that is focused on the southeastern coastal Tamil Nadu, but it also provides different insights that can easily be replicated, not just in coastal India, but also in different parts of Asia. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this comprehensive and informative presentation. So next up, let's welcome Dr. Surya Kumar Sapkota. He's the Director of the Planning and Monitoring Division at the Alternative Energy Promotion Center, Ministry of Energy, Water Resources and Irrigation, Nepal. And he is an expert in renewable energy policy and planning. So Surya, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Okay. Can you see? Can you see?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much. I am Surya Kumar Sapkota. I am working in Nepal Alternative Energy Promotion Center, which is a nodal agency for promotion of all small-scale renewable energy technology. And my research is analysis of those technologies for supplying the electricity. Especially, I focus on the remote area, but now linked to the coastal area. I think that will fit. So the grid extension in coastal area, of course, it is economically not viable and effective. We all know that it is a high investment in transmission and distribution cost, high transmission loss, and the people in the coastal area, they have a high poverty, low population density, low electricity demand. So there are a number of reasons why we need the small scale renewable energy technology, and then technically difficult due to long time for grid extensions. So small scale renewable energy technology, they are locally available, reliable, affordable, and sustainable, and they also meet the needs of the population and support the local economic activities. And then the selection of the and prioritization of the key barrier for deployment of small scales, how we select those technology, which technology are the best fit to those areas. So the small scale renewable energy technologies, they are potential technology for reliable and affordable electricity solution to coastal area. The lack of selection of appropriate small scale technology, they hindering the expansion of electricity because there are the number of reasons, for example, resource availability, cost issue, economic viability, environmental aspect, social acceptance, government policy, they are all hinderings for the electricity expansion. And the most of the government, they have a long-term goal that ensuring all population have access to electricity, which also enhance the energy security and support the electrification. So the selection of the most suitable small-scale renewable energy technology and prioritizing barrier for encouraging access to electricity in coast area is the most important. So these are the 29, the barriers under each, main barrier. For example, there are technical barrier, there are issue of economic and financials, the market barrier because market is very small, and there are legal and regulatory barriers. There are some restrictions for promoting the technology, and there is an institutional barrier because institutions are not capable of maintaining all these systems. And then there is also the political and government issue, because the corruption, nepotism, favoritisms for decision making, that also hindering the promotion of the technology. And also there is a issue of awareness and information barrier, because there is a very lack of information and low level of awareness among the peoples. So if when I use the AHP, the analytic hierarchy approach, that is a software based on the data availability, then I put all this data, then it seems that micro mini hydro seems the best available technology, but even though it is not so much relevant in the coastal area, but there is a solar and biomass energy, second and third most, and then wind energy the least. It depends upon the coastal area, whether there is a high wind or whether there is a good solar radiation, either whether you have a biomass energy resources. So it depends upon so which area you are considering. And then the most important factor for the decision of the which technology is suitable is the economical aspect is the most important. So the 42.3% of the surveyors, stakeholders say the economic is the most important, because the cost is most important, affordability of the peoples is most important, and the technical aspect, because there is no technology, you have to bring the technology there, and then people have to maintain this. The second is the technology and social aspect. There is a social religions aspect of the community which needs to be considered while promoting the technologies. And there is also political issues, the local government ownership, the policy issues, and environmental, of course, in the coastal area. If you have the wind turbine, then there is an issue of visibility, and there is an issue of the killing of the birds. So there are some issues. And these are the indicators, the which factors are most important. For example, capital cost of a technology is the most important for selection of the technology, economic viability, productive ease use, community empowerment, and the last one is the deployment time of technology. That is not important. So it depends upon how you give the priorities. And in the case of barrier, the economic and financial barrier, of course, is most important, because the you have to take the loans to install the technology, or government has to provide the heavy subsidy to reduce the cost, because there is a low capacity of the peoples in terms of economic. And there is also political and governance barriers are the second most important for selection of the technology. There is a legal and regulatory barriers, the third ones. And the technical barrier, the people say, because technology is available, so it is not actually barrier in most of the cases. And for the barriers, the lack of access to low interest loan to user, that is the most important, because it is not accessibly available. And productive energy of the energy is second important, I mean, the barrier, because people, they are using the electricity in the household, so they don't have the big industry in the area which consume the large scale of electricity, which they get the revenue and then use for the economic developments. So the micro mini hydro seems to be preferred technology, but however it is not suitable all the locations due to difficult geographic location and low water flow, especially for the coastal area. It is not preferable, but biomass the third most preferable, but not sufficiently available, because you don't have the regular supply of biomass feedstock for power generation. So the most important is the solar, because it is readily available even in the coastal area, and then the wind also resources are readily available. So these two technology resources are most preferable in the coastal area for providing the electricity and other energies. So in terms of barrier, economic and financial barrier, they are the most important barriers. Then of course the subsidy, which is important initially, even though it is not good for the long-term sustainability of the technology, but it is good for the poor and remote area and even coastal area. And then political and government barrier, they are the second most barriers due to lack of political commitment and corruption in the decisions. And then the excess of credit, the extension, promotion of productive energy use, political commitment, increase the transparency and good governments. They are the most important factors for decisions of the deployment of the any technology, small scale technologies. So in the second part, I use the Homer software for the techno-economic assessment of the off-grid hybrid systems, mostly the different type of combination of the different type of technology, how they fit and which are the most sustainable and then economically viable. So the off-grid area options, they are most suitable because there are many studies in the hybrid system assessment. Then off-grid seems to be more suitable in terms of reliable and high quality electricity supplies. And single source of technology is not reliable because you know that if there is no sunshine some days, then you don't have the electricity. So you have to rely on the wind power or other power. So there is a combination of the technologies are most important. And the solar and wind, they are the best fit because during the daytime you have a sunshine, solar radiation. During the nighttime, and then even in the evening you have the wind speed. So wind resources. So these two technologies resources are best fit to supply the regular, electricities. And these are the solar radiation and then the wind speed. When you get the highest solar radiations in March, April, May, that is the highest solar radiation. And then in the July and August, you have the highest wind resources. So there is a best fittings, in terms of the resource availabilities. And these are the combination of the different technology hybrid systems. And if you look on the combination of the different technology and in terms of net present cost and cost of electricity, of course, the diesel seems to be, the least cost, but in terms of environment, then the single, the solar photovoltaic system with 53 kilowatt for providing the electricity around 500 to 1000 household in the coastal area are the most favorable. But due to the reliability and other thing, then the solar and winds in the yes for the option for solar photovoltaic and wind turbine combination with the battery, they are the most suitable, even though cost of electricity is a little bit high, but in terms of long-term solution, the solar and wind are best fit for providing the electricities. So these are the sensitive analysis. If you increase the cost of the diesel, then there is a decrease of the cost of solar photovoltaic and wind turbine. So there is a chance that the diesel fuels is increasing in the international market, and if there is a disturbance, that means there is a least cost for the solar and wind. That means it is good for the promotion of the solar and wind, especially small scale renewable energy technologies. And these are also the analysis on the for the with diesel generator combination and without diesel generator combination, how the technology is fit. And so the hybrid system with zero generator is not recommended due to the environment issues and due to the high fuel cost. So the best availability is the 100% renewable energy. That is combination of the solar and wind turbine. They are the best fit even in the coastal areas. And in terms of sustainability of the technology, because you don't only need the selection of the technology and then optimum, designing of the system, but you need the sustainable operation of the systems. That means you have to consider some of the parameters for the sustainability of the hybrid system. So there are the 5 dimension parameter. One is the economic sustainability. Under this, there are the 4 sub indicators, and the environmental sustainability, there are the 3 indicators, and institutional sustainability, there are the 6 indicators, and there is a social sustainability. There are the 4 indicators, and finally technical dimension, there are the 6 indicators. So there are the around 20 indicators under this dimension, which are needed to consider while designing the system and for operation and maintenance for the long-term sustainability of the systems. So if you look on this sustainability, so I took the 2 hybrid system projects, solar and wind. in Nepal case, then the technical project has a more technical sustainability and social sustainability. But in terms of environmental and institutional sustainability, it is a less. And then if you look on the two hybrid system, there is the first one is the institutional. The project is more sustainable toward the institutions, and second is the more sustainable toward the socials, and the last one is the technical. So there are the issue of the technicals in the hybrid system, because there is no availability of the spare parts, and there is no trained manpower for the operation and maintenance of the system, and even the designing of the system has some fault. So for the second project, the technical has a strong sustainability aspect, and the last one is the economical. So it depends upon the type of project and how you design, how you make a framework for covering all the aspect of the sustainabilities. So very low technical performance of the hybrid system due to the non-function of the wind turbine, low quality wind turbine, warranty guarantee issue. There is no national technical standard, and there are some hybrid systems, they have a better economic performance, but some are facing the economic sustainability. So it depends upon how you design, how you plan, and what are the other aspect factor that you are considering for making the system more sustainable. So it depends upon the type of the systems, and then the regions, and then also the how you designs. So if you how you remove the barriers, the removal of the barriers through the policy formulation and good regulations, and provide the financial incentive and diversification of the productive energy use, designing of the hybrid system based on reliable resource assessment. Because if you have a data of more than 2 years or 5 years, then it more data are more reliable, so you can make a more best systems. But if you have a data of few months or even 1 year, that does not give the accurate resource assessments. So development of the national technical design and standard for off-grid, they are very important for maintaining the minimum technical standards and improvement in the technical design, availability of the spare parts, promotion of the in-use to make the financial sustainability, and also the central remoting monitoring system. If you have a central remoting monitoring system, then you can see the default and you can fix the system even through the remote. So these are some of the recommendation how you can improve the systems for the better performance. So thank you so much for the listenings.
Thank you so much, Surya. And I would like to thank both our speakers for insightful presentations. And now we invite our participants to ask any questions you may have for our speakers. We might have 5 or 10 minutes for this Q&A session. Any questions? Please feel free to unmute yourself.
May I ask from Devendra Raj?
Please, Danny.
So
Yes,
so
sure.
I now after the tsunami, because the tsunami is in your title, was there like any larger scale infrastructure that improved the situation of the fishermen? For example, better water supply or something like that was done by the government as post-tsunami reconstruction.
I could only hear half of your question. Can you please?
My question is that was there any infrastructure improvement in their situation as a result of post-tsunami reconstruction?
Yes, thank you very much. I got your question. Of course, there is a large-scale infrastructural change. For example, I conducted this study in 7 villages, but I could visit different fishing villages, which is not a part of my research. So, for example, I visited around 20 fishing villages along the coast, not just in Nagapattinam district, but also I visited some other fishing villages in Kanyakumari district, which is in the down south of coastal India. And I could see that tsunami and its effects brought different positive changes in their lives. For example, many fishers, thousands and thousands of fishers got free houses from non-governmental organizations, which constructively helped them in their everyday life and lifestyle. Along with that, the non-governmental organizations also brought different infrastructural development in the fishing villages, such as building this, building a kind of community hall to the fishing villages, and building different infrastructure facilities to mend their fishing nets and to dry their fishes. So different facilities, I could see that. So all the, on the one hand, it brought different coastal and environmental negative implications to the lives of fishers. On the other hand, it also brought different positive changes. And that, that it's not just a kind of old story. And even today, many fishing villages are continued to sustain the world networks that they got from the local NGOs. So it is still happening.
Yeah, that's really thank you. So because I at the time few years after tsunami, I actually wrote a little note called "The Tsunami Has Accelerated Climate Change," because what the tsunami did was it revealed so many new vulnerabilities that people hadn't really thought about, and so some of them were addressed in reconstruction, some of them were not so well addressed. So I think it will be interesting to add that aspect to your assessment of the current state and vulnerability and all that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.